This is live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and coming up in the next hour. ADB keeps India's GDP growth projection for financial year 2025 unchanged at 7%. Prime Minister Modi says Make in India is propelling India's economy onto the global stage. King Charles III sets out new Labour government's priorities at the state opening speech of Parliament in London, focuses on reviving economy and tackling housing issues. EU's von der Leyen faces precarious vote to win second term. She needs support from at least 361 of the European Parliament's 720 lawmakers to secure her second term as Commission President. And Muharram observed across the globe. It is a religious festival to honor the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, grandson of Prophet Muhammad. And a 117-strong Indian contingent to take part in Paris Olympics. Athletics to be the biggest group with 29 athletes vying for the medals. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has hailed the phenomenal success of the Make in India initiative, reiterating its role in terms of propelling India's economy into the global stage. Here's a report which talks about the Make in India becoming a global brand, reflecting the transformative journey of Indian-made products as they capture global markets and also earn international claim. Tripti Tripathi of DD India gets us more in this report.
India has emerged as a prominent player in the global economic landscape, captivating the attention of investors. The nation is also making important contributions beyond its borders with its strong economic position. Increasing exports and a robust manufacturing sector have been key priorities of the Indian government. The nation is realizing this dream with Make in India initiative that can add to the engines of global growth. Lauding this initiative, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday said that Make in India is propelling India's economy on the international stage. A report shared by MyGov India showed the global demand for Made in India bicycles, with exports surging to the UK, Germany and the Netherlands. Made in Bihar boots are now part of the Russian Army's gear, reflecting India's growing influence on international defense markets. There is also high demand for Kashmir willow bats and launch of products by India's first cooperative society, Amul, in the United States. India's UPI system, that is now a global phenomenon, enables seamless digital payments in multiple countries. India's economy is expanding at the fastest rate among major emerging economies. International Monetary Fund revised India's GDP growth forecast for the fiscal year 2024-25 to 7% despite geopolitical tensions in Europe and West Asia. Citing rebound in agriculture with above normal monsoon projections, Asian Development Bank maintained India's GDP growth forecast at 7.3% for the current financial year. As per the latest report from Boston Consulting Group, the Asian region is likely to contribute nearly 30% of the new financial wealth by 2028. India will add about $730 billion annually to the overall growth in the region through 2028. In 2023, India generated roughly $590 billion in new financial wealth, marking its largest increase in history. The report also says generative AI will play a crucial role in the digital transformation of wealth managers, with use cases along the entire value chain. Exports have also shown resilience amid global challenges in the first quarter. India's merchandise grew by 5.8%. Services exports exhibited a strong performance in June, contributing positively to the overall trade scenario. India has undergone a journey from fragility to stability and strength during the last 10 years. Tripti Tripathi's report, DD India.
Amidst all regality, royalty met politics as Britain's King Charles III officially opened the new session of Parliament on Wednesday. The King's speech was certainly the centrepiece of the state opening of Parliament, which set the tone for the government's forthcoming legislative agenda, UK's first left-leaning government in almost 14 years. Ravindra Chauhan of DD India gets us more.
The state opening of British Parliament took place on Wednesday, marking the formal start of the parliamentary year and setting out the government's agenda for the 2024-25 session. In his address to the assembled lords and lawmakers, King Charles articulated the new government's commitment to service and outlined a robust agenda focused on revitalizing the economy and tackling critical issues.
With its fiscal rules. Stability will be the cornerstone of my government's economic policy, and every decision will be consistent with its fiscal rules. It will legislate to ensure that all significant tax and spending changes are subject to an independent assessment by the Office for Budget Responsibility. Bills will be brought forward to strengthen audit and corporate governance alongside pension investment, private school fees.
King Charles also set out Prime Minister Keir Starmer's legislative agenda on asylum and immigration. Starmer has already confirmed he will junk his predecessor Rishi Sunak's flagship immigration policy.
A bill will be introduced to modernise the asylum and immigration system, establishing a new border security command and delivering enhanced counter-terror powers to tackle organised immigration crime.
The state opening on Wednesday took place with the customary procession from Buckingham Palace to the Houses of Parliament. King Charles, adorned in regal attire, departed from the robing room and proceeded to the House of Lords chamber, where he delivered the ceremonial speech marking the beginning of the parliamentary session. The proceedings began with the King instructing the Lord Great Chamberlain to summon Black Rod, who in turn called upon members of Parliament, the MPs from the House of Commons, to join the gathering in the Lord's Chamber. The King's speech now sets the stage for rigorous debate and scrutiny by members of both houses over the next 6 days, starting Thursday.
Mr. Speaker, this government has been elected to deliver nothing less than national renewal, to stop the chaos of the past 14 years, turn the page on an era of politics as noisy performance, and return it to public service.
The House of Lords will engage in deliberations over the content of the speech, examining its proposals and implications. Simultaneously, the House of Commons will undertake discussions and eventually vote on the King's speech. Ravindra Chauhan's report for DD India.
The party opposite has inherited an economy.
Stuart Smith of DD India joins us from London live to take us through the regalia of the state opening of Parliament and its significance, Stuart, to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a historic event which has gone back hundreds of years, the way that this is managed. The significance for the UK is King Charles III, while king, is also the head of state. And so ultimately, all power derives from him to this new government. And so it's he that has to make it clear that it's his government acting in his name that is suggesting these new laws that should be passed. And so behind me in the House of Lords, King Charles made that speech written for him by the government, by the new Prime Minister Keir Starmer, but with his words they become part of the new government's agenda. The state opening of Parliament happens every year, but it's always particularly interesting when it's a new government in power, as we have here in the UK at the moment, because it's a whole host of new legislation that has not been much previewed apart from during the election campaign and in the manifesto, and it's going to take the country on a very different direction than we've seen before.
And to begin with, the King's speech was certainly the centerpiece of the event. It always has been like that, setting the government's legislative agenda. But if you could just give us a sense of the first, this being the first left-leaning government. So as far as King's speech is concerned, everybody was looking forward to what he has to say as far as this fresh government's top priorities are concerned.
Yeah, so while the King reads the words of the new government, he, under the British Constitution, must remain impartial and neutral on all matters. So while it's him reading them out, it doesn't mean he necessarily endorses what is being said, nor necessarily is against it. It's just the ceremonial importance of the event that matters for the way the government works here. As to its content, that has been drafted by the Prime Minister, a left-leaning government, as you say, the first time for 14 years in this country. And what that means in practice, some interesting examples that came from the King's speech. It means the nationalisation of the railways. It means some aspects of the way the UK energy industry works will be nationalised, i.e. brought back into public governance, will be controlled by the government now. There are also new rules about trying to increase planning applications by allowing and relaxing laws relating to how people can ask those planning applications to go ahead in order to get, as Keir Starmer says, Britain building and in order to develop more homes. There are the promises on the National Health Service, which we saw from the Conservative Party as well, but there's hope that the Labour government may see it as a greater priority and also be willing to take more risks in order to make that change. And then finally, when it comes to things like health, in addition, the new Labour government is promising restrictions on energy drinks, for example, for children. So a more interventionist government is the way that this one is being described.
Yeah, and also for Prime Minister Starmer, this was also an occasion for Starmer to present his action plan and how he aims to deliver his campaign promises. Some of you talked about to sort of induce bold changes at a very modest cost. It was a very interesting selection of words there, which intermittently drew a lot of applause / reaction from the Lords and the lawmakers present in the House.
Yeah, there was irony in a sense that what the King announced in the House of Lords was new information that would suggest the Lords will end up, some of them, losing their jobs. We're talking about hereditary peers, those that end up in the House of Lords because of their ancestral history, a antiquated, some would say, part of the way the UK government works, and something that the Labour Party has promised to change. Now, the exact details of how it would work will be laid out in the bills in Parliament that will be debated over the next few weeks, but the gist is that the Labour Party would like to reform the House of Lords so that these rather archaic and old-fashioned approaches to the second house here in the UK are ended. So in the manifesto and during the election there was talk about forcing peers to retire after the age of 80. That doesn't seem like it will happen, but what does still seem set to take place is an end to that hereditary system here in the UK.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Stuart Smith, for joining us live from London. Thank you. And coming up on DD India News Hour, coming up next, this is what we have for you. Paul Kagame is all set to continue as Rwanda president for the 4th consecutive term. An assassination attempt on Trump unites the Republican camp ahead of the 2024 presidential polls. China and Russia begin their joint live-fire naval exercise in the South China Sea.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
As the world gears up for the biggest sporting extravaganza, Olympics 2024, we at DD India are all set to bring you reports, reactions and all the latest action from Ground Zero.
You're watching watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. Shifting focus to European Parliament, which has come pretty hard on the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban for meeting President Vladimir Putin in Moscow recently, almost reprimanding him of his so-called self-styled Ukraine peace mission. In a resolution passed on Wednesday, the European Parliament condemned Orban's Russia visit as a blatant violation of the EU's treaties and common foreign policy. It may be recalled that Hungary took over as the rotating 6-month EU presidency in July. This is a role which puts Budapest in charge of organizing EU meetings, but it does not authorize Orban to conduct any sort of diplomacy on behalf of the 27-country EU bloc. Saglik Chakrabarti of DD India has filed this report.
It is now or never as the crucial vote to decide on continuing Ursula von der Leyen for another term as European Commission President will take place on Thursday, and Ursula is leaving no stone unturned in her effort to convince EU lawmakers to make up their mind for supporting her. Von der Leyen's supporters say she offers stability in the wake of EU facing an existential threat in the midst of geopolitical developments like Russia-Ukraine conflict, uncertainty over US polls, and an assertive China.
Without a doubt, and that to say, my Fine Gael colleagues and I would be voting for Ursula von der Leyen, because when you look at a person's record, you have to look at it over the entirety of their record. And over the 5 years that she has been president, she's done a remarkable job.
The action of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban for meeting Russian President Putin has come for criticism from European Parliament. The move comes in the latest reprimand of Budapest's self-styled peace mission to end the war in Ukraine. In a resolution, the European Parliament condemned the visit to Russia as a blatant violation of the EU's treaties and common foreign policy, calling for repercussions for Hungary. The resolution as a whole, which also included sections on the EU's continuous support for Ukraine, was adopted by a large majority of 495 EU lawmakers out of the 679 that voted.
A few days ago, the most visible head of the new group of false patriots, Orban, met with Putin to denigrate the EU, to proclaim that he has a peace plan that nobody knows about, and to promote Russian expansionism.
Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine have exchanged 95 prisoners of war from each side, totaling to 190 prisoners after the United Arab Emirates acted as an intermediary. The prisoner exchange was the third of its kind in the past 7 weeks. The Kherson region bore the brunt of the Ukrainian attacks, with 1 person dead, 8 others injured, according to Russian installed official. In another tragic incident, a Ukrainian drone killed a young couple traveling in a civilian car outside Russia's southern border town of Belgorod. With bureau inputs, Saglik Chakrabarti for DD India.
And DD India's Alex Kadia has sent us this report from Brussels.
Far right would be able to mobilize as in a united front, perhaps not to block this resolution, but at least to have a show of opposition, a show of force among their ranks. That doesn't seem to have been the case. Quite a large majority of 495 lawmakers of those who voted, that was 679 voted, 495 voted in favour of this resolution. That was clearly a message that the governing coalition of the centre-right, centre-left and centrist parties have a strong majority when it comes to support for Ukraine, and therefore criticising Viktor Orban. We heard the leader of the Socialists saying that Viktor Orban met with President Putin to denigrate the EU, to proclaim that he has a peace plan that nobody knows about, and to promote Russian expansionism. The Hungarian foreign minister hitting back, saying it's unacceptable to stigmatise a country for advocating diplomatic solutions. That was in a statement just yesterday. Clearly, there is a will in the European Parliament to make sure Hungary is held to account, as they see it, for breaking ranks with the European position, a common position agreed by those 27 member states and by the European Parliament. At the moment, this resolution may have passed, but Hungary remains on a clear collision course with a majority of the European Parliament and a majority of the European member states. Caroline.
And now let's move on to the update in the recently concluded elections in Rwanda, where Paul Kagame is all set to continue as the Rwandan president for the 4th consecutive term, as he gets the vast majority or margin of the votes. The full provisional results are due to be declared by 20th of July, and final ones will be known by 27th July.
Paul Kagame is all set to extend his term. Rwandan President Kagame is expected to cruise to a fourth term in office against two opposition candidates who were cleared to run against him but have only modest expectations. He has already secured 99.15% of the vote, with most ballots counted, as opposition candidates were largely absent due to restrictions. Kagame has won praise during his tenure for rebuilding the country of 14 million after a genocide in which more than 1 million people were killed. But his government has been accused by Western nations and rights activists of assassinating opponents and backing rebel groups in neighboring Congo for nearly 30 years. The country's de facto leader for 3 decades faced only 2 challengers after the courts banned his most prominent critiques. Let's take a look at his political journey. Beginning in 1990 as commander of the forces of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, he led the struggle to liberate Rwanda. He served as chair of the African Union from 2018 to 2019 and chaired the East African Community from 2018 to 2021. In 2019, he was elected chairperson of the East African Community and has been leading the institutional reform of the African Union since 2016. President Kagame is currently chairperson of the AU Development Agency New Partnership for Africa's Development, as well as African Union leader for domestic health financing. Internationally, Kagame is recognized for his efforts in regional diplomacy and promoting African unity. He has served on various international boards and committees advocating for African development and reform. The hallmarks of President Kagame's administration are peace and reconciliation, women's empowerment, promotion of investment and entrepreneurship, and access to information technology, a cause he also champions as co-chair of the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development. Kagame's political dominance has been bolstered by his party's control over the political landscape, resulting in landslide electoral victories. Despite criticism, he remains a prominent and influential figure in African politics, shaping Rwanda's trajectory in the 21st century. Bureau Report, DD India.
And from Kinshasa for more updates, DD India's Chris Okarminga joins us from Kinshasa there in Rwanda. Now, President Paul Kagame, Chris is, he's now on course to extend his 24-year-old rule by another 5 years in a landslide win. It is just a matter of formality now as far as the official announcements are made on 20th and 27th. How does this work?
That's right. According to the Electoral Commission, more than 80% of the votes, total votes that were cast have been counted, and President Kagame has got 99.15%. He's a clear lead. He has a clear lead in this election, and the two opponents who stood in this election, Frank Habineza and Philip Mpaimana, have already conceded defeat. Both of them got less than 1%. And it's pretty much a done deal. But some opposition figures, Rwandan opposition figures living in exile, have described the election in Rwanda as a sham and a comedy. They are urging the international community not to take it seriously because they say President Paul Kagame has been leading the country with an iron fist and has not allowed serious contenders to challenge him in the presidential election.
Having said that, can we say that there was actually no meaningful opposition, as you just mentioned? There were bans inflicted, they were in exile, and with the leading figures banned out there. So clearly this was not a contest. So overall, how are there questions about the credibility, the very credibility of these elections? Because you don't have elections when there is no opposition.
Yeah, so that position is being fronted by the opposition, critics of President Paul Kagame, who has ruled this country for 24 years and is going to extend his rule for another 5 years. Many of them have been saying that the president has not been tolerating any criticism from politicians. They have been harassing them and imprisoning them, and so that is what they are saying, that this is not an election that was a genuine one. But the government in Rwanda is saying that they have maintained all the principles of a free and fair election. They've ensured that democratic rights of the people of Rwanda is respected, and many of his supporters are saying that President Paul Kagame has been the clear favorite and that they voted for him massively. They say President Kagame has restored peace in the country. He has been able to build a lot of infrastructure and improve the economy that was really in shatters after the 1994 genocide, where about 800,000 Tutsis and some moderate Hutus were killed by Hutu extremists.
Chris, finally, so this again coming back to power, despite no opposition or voices of dissent, his pro-people's policy, he seems to enjoy a massive pro-people image in the country by securing reportedly 99.9% margin of the vote. So he does have overwhelming support coming from Rwandans, is it?
Well, one may argue that way because President Kagame has been a person who believes in action. He moves around to different villages of Rwanda and calls meetings, town hall meetings with the locals, and calls the leaders of that area. And if those people accuse the leaders of doing something wrong, then they are punished right there on the spot, and that has made him very popular, especially in some of the rural parts of Rwanda. But on the other hand, he has not been tolerating criticism, especially about the way he has been running the country. He has had a very firm grip on power in Rwanda, and that is what is the biggest criticism about his leadership. He has not been allowing dissent, and so people have been criticizing him for really stifling the freedoms of the Rwandan people.
All right, we'll leave it there. Many thanks, Chris, for joining us live from Kinshasa and Rwanda on the elections and the results of the elections. Thank you. And from Rwanda, let's shift our focus to U.S. elections, where an assassination attempt on Donald Trump has united the Republican Party ahead of the 2024 presidential polls. Now, Donald Trump's former rivals have offered full support or full endorsement of his candidature at a party convention. Day 2 of the Republican National Convention kicked off on Wednesday, with Republicans led by presidential nominee Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance. They shifted discussions to issues of national security and foreign policy.
It was a grand show of the grand old party as it readies to go full throttle for the November 5 polls, with Donald Trump firmly entrenched in the driver's seat and J.D. Vance as his running mate. Any doubts of division within the ranks was addressed thoroughly and comprehensively by the speakers, many of whom stood against Trump in the party primaries. Nikki Haley offered a full-throated endorsement of Donald Trump's candidacy. She had described Trump as unelectable and unfit for office during her campaign.
We should acknowledge that there are some Americans who don't agree with Donald Trump 100% of the time. I happen to know some of them. You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me, I haven't always agreed with President Trump.
The conservative Florida Governor DeSantis, whose campaign sputtered early in the year, attacked Biden as too old for the job.
Biden is just a figurehead. He's a tool for imposing a leftist agenda on the American people. They support open borders, allowing millions and millions of illegal aliens to pour into our country and to burden our communities, but just don't send any to Martha's Vineyard, then they get really upset.
Trump has pledged to launch the largest deportation effort in U.S. history. Former GOP presidential contender Vivek Ramaswamy took the stage and delivered an impassioned speech backing Donald Trump.
That the media doesn't want you to hear from the Republican Party. Our message to black Americans is this: the media has tried to convince you for decades that Republicans don't care about your communities, but we do. We want for you what we want for every American. Safe neighborhoods, clean streets, good jobs, a better life for your children, and a justice system that treats everyone equally, regardless of your skin color and regardless of your political beliefs.
In the wake of the shooting, however, voters' fear about the deeply polarized nation ahead of November 5 election seem only to have deepened. Authorities have yet to identify a motive for the shooting. The show of harmony at the Republican National Convention was intended to contrast with Democrats, who have spent weeks mired in intra-party tensions over whether Biden should abandon his re-election bid after his halting June 27 debate performance against Trump. Vidarthi Rana, Siddharth for DD India.
China and Russia began their joint live-fire naval exercises Maritime Cooperation 2024 in the South China Sea. The opening ceremony of the Russian-Chinese naval exercise took place in the Chinese port of Zhangjiang. Both countries were to deploy at least 3 vessels each for the 3-day exercise. The vessels set off from Zhangjiang on Monday. Russia's RIA state news agency reported on Tuesday that the Russian Navy and the Chinese Navy conducted artillery firing as part of the joint drills. 9 crew members from MT Falcon Prestige sunken oil tanker, including 8 Indians and 1 Sri Lankan, have been recovered alive during the search and rescue operations. The search and rescue operations to find the remaining 7 crew members will continue in the area. Omani authorities are conducting a search and rescue operation at the scene in coordination with maritime authorities. The tanker was heading to the Yemeni airport of Aden and capsized off Oman's major industrial port of Duqm on Monday. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for an assault on a Shiite Muslim mosque in Oman that left at least 9 people dead, including 3 attackers on Tuesday, a rare security breach in the oil-producing Gulf state. The Oman police said that 28 people of various nationalities were wounded, including security personnel. Islamic State said in a statement late on Tuesday that 3 of its suicide attackers fired on worshippers at the mosque on Monday evening and exchanged gunfire with Omani security forces until morning. Police have not said whether they have identified a motive for the attack or made any arrests. Omani authorities also have not released the identity of the attackers. The Indian Embassy in Oman in a statement said that it is closely following up the well-being of the resident Indian community in the aftermath of the shooting incident in Muscat City on 15th of this month. The Indian envoy to Oman, Amit Narang, spoke with Tausif Abbas, son of late Bashajan Ali Hussain, who unfortunately lost his life in the incident. The ambassador assured full support of the embassy for repatriation of Hussein's mortal remains back to India and all other support that the family may need. Embassy officials have visited 3 Indian nationals who have sustained injuries and are undergoing treatment in Khula Hospital. The Indian ambassador also spoke with their families and assured full support. Ambassador conveyed his sincere appreciation for the prompt action taken by the Omani security agencies in dealing with the crisis and protecting the lives of the innocent civilians. The embassy conveyed its sympathies with the families of those who have tragically lost their lives in this incident and wishes speedy recovery to all those who have been injured. And still to come on DD India News Hour, this is what we have for you. Coming up next, we will delve deep into various aspects of surging Indian economy and discuss the success stories of Make in India initiative on global scale with a guest in the studio. And India advocates urgent UN reforms, emphasizes multipolarity in global affairs.
As the world gears up for the biggest sporting extravaganza, Olympics 2024, we at DD India are all set to bring you reports, reactions and all the latest action from Ground Zero. Watch DD India's super exclusive show, Cheer for Bharat. Only on DD India from July the 22nd at 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT. Get ready to cheer for Indian athletes at the Paris Olympics 2024.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. And going back to our top story, the success stories showcasing the international demand for made in India items, the brand made in India and its growing presence in international markets. Basically, we will be talking about how Make in India is propelling or fueling India's economy into the global stage. Prasanjit K. Basu, senior economist, joining us in our DD India New Delhi studio for discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Basu. Now, we'll from Bihar boots to Amul and the bats that are made in Kashmir, and if you look at the online sales in e-commerce also, overview of the reasons attributed to this sudden surge of Indian-made products in various domains and sectors making their mark globally.
Well, this is a long initiative. Of course, the Prime Minister in his first Independence Day address said, "Come, make in India." It's been a difficult journey, but 10 years later, we're beginning to see the first significant fruits. So if you look at Apple, it is significantly expanding its manufacturing in India, and it is making in India for the world. And similarly, we're beginning to see that occur across a vast swath of different products. And it'll soon be reflected in our exports of goods, which have continued to actually outperform most of Asia over the last 5 or 6 years. Especially since the COVID period. We've seen a really powerful export recovery. There have been a few difficult months, but generally speaking, we're now on a recovery
the
trail
upward
as well.
trajectory.
Yeah.
Okay, in the space of India's UPI, that has also become a global phenomena, and this has enabled seamless digital payments in multiple countries, and that's a very revolutionary step, if I would use that word.
Yes, I think Digital India was another of the Prime Minister's major focus areas, and it has truly borne fruit. The digital stack has made India a global leader. India is now by far the single biggest source of digital payments on a monthly basis anywhere in the world. In fact, the number of digital transactions in India is more than the next 2 countries put together. And that is a huge success that almost every Indian can palpably feel.
Right.
And it wasn't an easy thing to do, but that achievement is remarkable. And of course, we've just seen that the IMF has raised its forecast for India's
and
GDP.
And the ADB numbers are also very good.
Yeah, I mean, they're just about 7%. I think they're too low. Frankly speaking, this year, real GDP is likely to grow about 8.5%. The average growth of the last 3 years was 8.3%. The latest year was also about 8.2%. So 8.3% growth over the last 3 years at a time when the current account has moved into surplus in the latest quarter and inflation is pretty moderate, means that there are no signs of overheating and the Indian economy can accelerate. In fact, we are going to see an acceleration this year. So I think these forecasts of 7% growth are somewhat laughable to me. What we should be looking at is at least 8 and the likelihood of 8.5% growth and more in subsequent years, especially as the production-linked incentive scheme begins to bear full fruit and as we begin to see a broadening of India's manufacturing rebound.
Yes.
The manufacturing sector has been a relative laggard, but if you look at...
How do you see manufacturing in defense sector?
Well, the defense sector has seen a huge pickup. I mean, over the last, before 2014, India had virtually no defense exports. We are still a significant net importer of defense products, but there's been a massive quantum leap in defense exports.
Self-reliant and Atmanirbhar Bharat.
So Atmanirbhar is beginning to result in significant import substitution. We're seeing significant collaborations even in producing engines, jet engines for fighter aircraft.
Yes.
So those are significant technological leaps that will have that will generate externalities that bear fruit in civilian uses as well over time. But the defense sector is clearly one where India has seen spectacular results. But we are still at a fairly early stage, I'd say a nascent stage of a 5-decade build out of defense capabilities, which will also have other technological benefits in generating other types of manufacturing potential.
Right.
So the world is now coming to India to collaborate and build out manufacturing capabilities here.
How do you see convergences and collaborations in the technological advancements in fintech innovation and you talked about digital India, but fintech is and startups and fintech.
Yeah, I mean, you know, apart from digital, the Startup India initiative has been remarkable too. The massive number of unicorns generated in India. With startups, you're always going to have a few setbacks along the way. We've had some spectacular results in terms of unicorns emerging, but we've also had a few spectacular bust-ups. That is the nature of a startup economy. One needs to get used to some failures along the way. But while there are a few failures, the ecosystem of entrepreneurship is generating a tremendous amount of buzz and is attracting lots of capital coming into India, not only in the form of equity and debt flows, but also private equity, venture capital. There's a real buzz around the entire ecosystem because India is by far the fastest growing major economy in the world. The major competitor economy, China, has slowed to below 5% growth in the latest quarter. So when you compare the emerging market universe, India is a standout story.
Standout story in that sense. Final word, Prasanjit. All this, Make in India, Self-Reliance India or Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense sector, all that actually, adding up to the brand India success story. So it's about brand India worldwide that has actually garnered recognition, not theoretically, but we have the figures and we have the results.
We're beginning to see the results. I think there's a long way to go before India replaces China as the sort of brand for manufacturing. Now, with regard to services, the India brand is all over. But with regard to manufacturing, India is still at a very nascent stage. We're seeing the results of a 10-year push to make in India, digital India, all of that, and the fintech aspect of it. All of that is beginning to bear fruit now. But what we also need to see is some more success in labor-intensive manufacturing. I keep emphasizing that the one lacuna we see is in labor-intensive manufacturing. So I would urge states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal to join with Assam and Orissa. Assam and Orissa are relative success stories. Those three
internal convergences,
so
domestic
basically you need
convergences.
competition among them to garner the labor-intensive manufacturing investments that are currently going more to places like Bangladesh and Vietnam. So if Bangladesh can do it, why can't West Bengal, Bihar and Eastern Uttar Pradesh?
Well, Bihar goods have reached Russia.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but you see, it's happening, but in very small numbers. What we really need is factories producing textiles, garments, shoes, toys, processed food, and employing 20,000, 40,000, 50,000, 100,000 people. So when you have that sort of magnitude of growth in labor-intensive manufacturing, then these numbers that we are now seeing will
further escalate,
will
multiply effect. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on this lead story of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now let's move on to some more stories. Now, India has once again called for much-needed reforms at the United Nations, starting with the United Nations Security Council, delivering India's statement at the UNSC Open Debate on multilateral cooperation in the interest of a more just, democratic and sustainable world order. Chargé Affairs Ambassador R. Ravindra said that multipolarity is being witnessed in the world and it is here to stay.
Multipolarity, as we are witnessing it now, is here to stay. The primary reason the multilateral system has failed to deliver is that it is still stuck in a 1945 vintage binary outlook reflected clearly in the composition of this Security Council. The core of India's position on reformed multilateralism, therefore, lies in a call for the reform of the UN Security Council that is reflective of contemporary realities of today. For multilateral cooperation to deliver, it must emanate from a representation of developing countries in all major decision-making bodies, especially in the peace and security architecture. As we convene for the Summit of the Future, let us recommit to time-bound negotiations on UNSC reforms. The multilateral system cannot deliver without the sustained commitment of major powers and groups to global institutions and a rules-based order. And in this context, it is important that all must adhere to the basic building block of international cooperation, which is good faith negotiations. Sabotaging of negotiating processes and mechanisms by big countries or groups in the narrow interest of their own positions is detrimental to the multilateral spirit and must be called out wherever necessary.
In Bangladesh, the ongoing quota reform movement became violent on Wednesday afternoon when police fired tear gas and sound grenades at protesting students in Dhaka University. 6 people were killed and scores were injured on Tuesday as students' protests against the top job quota across the country turned deadly. The border guard Bangladesh personnel have been deployed to maintain law and order situation on ground. And still to come on DD India News Hour, coming up next. A US startup is addressing the escalating problem of space debris with an artificial intelligence-powered tracking system. India releases final list of contingent for Paris Olympics.
As the world gears up for the biggest sporting extravaganza, Olympics 2024, we at DD India are all set to bring you reports, reactions and all the latest action from Ground Zero. Watch DD India's super exclusive show, Cheer for Bharat. Only on DD India from July the 22nd at 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT. Get ready to cheer for Indian athletes at the Paris Olympics 2024.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar on Wednesday met several political leaders of Mauritius, including former Prime Ministers Paul Berenger and Naveen Ramgoolam on the second and the final day of his visit to the island nation. Later on the day, Jaishankar Minister said and the Mauritius Prime Minister inaugurated a Mediclinic built with Indian grant assistance in Grand Bois, which adds to the list of signature projects in the country.
This family has gathered here for a very important event, which is the opening of the Mediclinic. I think it was described as the newest expression of our friendship. And I'm told it will provide secondary health care for 16,000 people of Gramboa area. And we feel very proud to be a partner in this collaboration.
Union Minister of Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal attended the G7 Trade Ministers meeting held at Villa San Giovanni in Calabria in Italy. The meeting served as a pivotal platform for discussions on enhancing global trade relations and economic cooperation. On the sidelines of the meeting, Minister Goyal also held several high-level bilateral meetings with the counterparts, reflecting India's commitment to foster stronger economic partnerships globally. 12 Naxals were killed in an encounter with security forces in Maharashtra's Gadchiroli district. 7 automatic weapons were recovered from them. The operation was launched around 10 a.m. IST after a credible intelligence was received of location of Naxals camping near Chhattisgarh border. 1 PSI of C-60 battalion and 1 security official of Gadchiroli police suffered injuries. Maharashtra Deputy Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis has declared a cash reward of Rs 51 lakh for C-60 commandos and Gadchiroli police for the successful major operation. A US startup is addressing the escalating problem of space debris with an artificial intelligence-powered tracking system designed to alert satellite operators of potential collisions. Primetime, which is co-founded by Apple's Steve Wozniak and based in Hawaii, emphasizes the growing need to track, record and monitor the vast amount of space junk as more satellites are launched into orbit. Their platform, Wayfinder, is currently monitoring over 35,000 objects in orbit. The startup aims to provide its tracking data to satellite operators, international space agencies and the global scientific community. From the north to the south and from the west to the east, several regions across India are currently facing severe flooding, putting local communities in intense danger. Meteorological authorities have also issued alerts due to persistent heavy downpours. Here's a detailed report by DD India's Rahul Upadhyay.
With the monsoon accounting for 75% of annual rainfall, India faces the peril of floods. The fury of these deluges continue unabated, devastating communities and disrupting daily life across the affected regions. The flood situation in India's northeastern state of Assam improved significantly on Wednesday as water levels across the state receded. According to a report published by Assam State Disaster Management Authority, the number of people affected by the deluge decreased to around 400,000, even as one more death was reported from Dhemaji. Presently, 15,000 people are taking shelter in 122 relief camps across the state. Heavy rain in upper regions of Uttarakhand in North India and India's neighbouring country Nepal has caused water levels to rise in several rivers in Uttar Pradesh, resulting in floods affecting over 1,500 villages across 17 districts. The floods have affected 1.48 million people, of whom 529,000 are those whose property, including crops, homes and goods, have been destroyed. Severe flooding disrupted life in Shahjahanpur city, affecting about a dozen colonies, the medical college and the national highway, as well as about 70 villages. Meanwhile, people trapped by the swirling waters were rescued by NDRF teams and were accommodated in camps set up by the administration. In view of the rising water level of Ganga in Varanasi, the operation of small boats in the river has been suspended till further orders. The India Meteorological Department has forecast the possibility of widespread rains in South Indian state of Kerala for the next 5 days. Heavy downpour is expected to continue in all districts of state on Wednesday and Thursday. A red alert was issued in Wayanad district in view of the possibility of extremely heavy rainfall. 11 relief camps have been opened as many areas are flooded after incessant rains. One death was also reported due to electrocution because of snapped power lines. Rahul Upadhyay reports for DD India.
Muharram, the first month of the Islamic calendar, was observed today. Here's a detailed report.
The 10th day of Muharram, known as Ashura, is observed by members of the Muslim community, marking the martyrdom of Hazrat Imam Hussain, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad. Ashura holds special significance in Islam as it symbolizes the battle against tyranny and injustice. Hussain stood strong against the oppressive regime of Yazid. On Wednesday, Muharram processions were taken out at several places in India. People gathered in Mumbai, Bhopal, Hyderabad for the Muharram processions. In Delhi, security arrangements were made for the Tazia processions. In many parts of the world, processions are organized to remember the ultimate sacrifice of Imam Hussain. People gathered in Iraq's Karbala for commemorations for the day of Ashura. Despite scorching temperatures, Muslims in Iran and Bahrain also gathered and remembered grief and suffering of Imam Hussain. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, you're watching DD India News Hour, and time now for some sports news. With only 8 days to go for the biggest sports competition in the world, the Paris Olympics, Indian Olympic Association has officially released the final list of contingent for the Summer Games. India will be sending 117 athletes at this month's Paris Olympics, including 7 reserves. Athletics is the biggest group in the contingent with 29 members, followed by a 21-member shooting team and 19-player hockey squad. 8 players will represent India in table tennis, while badminton will feature 7 competitors, including 2-time Olympic medalist PV Sindhu. Wrestling, archery and boxing will have 6 representatives each. Golf has 4 Indian representatives. Tennis has 3, 2 each from swimming and sailing 2, and 1 each of 4 equestrian, judo, rowing and weightlifting. Final contingent also features 140 support staff and officials. The games will run from July 26 to August 11. And that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.